Okay, we're live. It's ticking over. If I say this every time, Boris, before I even introduce you, if you didn't watch that first 5 minutes, this is me and Boris from Paris in person. We're about to do an anti-clockwise loop of Parc Monceau. Someone's watching. Let us know if the sound works and everything. Ashley, I can see that there's a name there. And you're Boris.
I am.
A Serbian accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell us about yourself.
So I came to Paris 12 years ago to pursue my studies, my superior studies in the Sorbonne, and then I stayed here, first done with my master's, then enrolled in a thesis. Halfway through my thesis I started working as a guide to support my research, and then when I was done with that I continued working as a guide. It just grew into...
It grabbed your heart.
It grabbed my heart.
Okay.
It never let go.
And Lena Norden, who is my wife, I'll be honest here, she said, "Looking good, guys." That means it's working. Hi, Lena.
Hi, Lena.
If you're
gonna subjected there, but we'll take it anyhow.
Yeah, that's true. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk around what I think is the most beautiful park, what Boris said is the most elegant park.
Yeah.
And you're going to point out, you've promised to answer every single question that a subscriber has.
I'll try my best.
So what I think we've already talked. We're not going to even touch on the toll thing because we've already talked about that. Go back and watch the other bit for that, guys. But I'm going to turn the camera around and you're going to sort of introduce this concept of the park for us, I think.
Well, okay, the first thing to say is that just a brief recap that this is the park that divided what used to be the city of Paris and what was not the city of Paris. It was divided by this large wall that spanned for 24 kilometers. Now, the interesting thing is that back in the medieval period, those walls were raised to protect the city and to ensure its safety. Cities were mostly used for trade, but this wall was not made for safety, it was made for taxation. So it was only made to stop people from entering the city and to actually charge them entrance to the city.
And how long ago are we talking now, Boris?
Well, we're talking years just before the French Revolution, so that would be something like 160-ish, like if the French Revolution was in 1789. So this wall basically was built around that period.
And was it an actual wall, or was it?
Oh yeah, it was a wall. Okay. It was a rampart. Yeah, actually, like a very thick wall.
Because regular listeners to this show know I love city walls. I'm obsessed with the Philippe Auguste wall.
Oh really?
Obsessed.
Ah, sweet. Well, this entire street, basically metro lines 2 and 6 follow the former wall that used to go around the city of Paris, and that was the last wall before they basically destroyed them all and made Paris a more open city. Now, the thing with this particular park is that it was made by a Duke of Chartres, a very interesting person who wanted to rival other very wealthy aristocrats who had their own park ideas and who had their own massive ego projects. Basically, you could say that back in the day, having a park of your own was a bit of a status symbol. So he decided to make this park and to make it more original, right? He wanted to rival Désert de Metz, in a certain manner, even the Park of Versailles.
So what's his name? The Duke
de Chartres.
Okay, Duke de Chartres. Yeah. Okay.
So, who was a pretty interesting person. We can address him later. He was a Freemason as well. And
that sounds like some conspiracy stuff we can talk about later.
We will have a lot of conspiracy stuff.
By the way, the light's great. You're looking very good, Boris.
Thank you, Ollie. I made an effort to represent your podcast.
And just let me say, there's 9 people watching currently. So if you guys have questions, I can guarantee you now, Boris knows his stuff. History, walls, Paris. You've got the guy here.
Walls are my specialty. Yeah,
is that true?
No, not really.
Okay, yeah. And I've got to keep remembering that. Sorry to interrupt you, but we have to remember not just to show the footpath and to show the whole park in its glory as we go.
Make sure to show this trash can here right
Okay, I'll go on. I'll give you the whole picture of Paris.
Yeah, this is the whole picture. Like, let's not leave any details.
So back to what you were saying. John Murray just says, did the Duke own the park? I think that's where you're up to.
Yeah, he actually did. Yeah, he purchased this land, and then that was his own thing. Now the thing with the park is that. We said that it was filled with different follies. Now, what a folly mean in French is in English is this architectural feat that has nothing to do with the current time. It has nothing to do with the current style. It's like if you're living in the 18th or the 19th century, you build an Egyptian-style pyramid, or you build like a Tatar tent, or you build like a Corinthian pillar colonnade that we're also going to see.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be this park like filled with wonders of the era, filled with entertaining stuff.
Is that why you say it's elegant?
Well, I think it's elegant because it's English-style park, and that it's a really nice balance between these like wonders of the world that are supposed to be exotic, but that are not too gaudy, right? So I think that's the elegant part. And I think what really brings the elegance is this harmony of shapes and surfaces you can see in the park. And of course, here you can see some kindergarten parts of the park, some playgrounds, contemporary addition to the park.
So you said that this park, before we got started, you said it's about a kilometer around. Is that a kilometer in?
Kilometer and 50 meters exactly. Yeah, I know that because I used to come here to run. So.
So we're gonna do the whole lap, and that's where we're gonna finish. So to get your questions in, that's how long you've got. Sometimes they're quiet, the questioners. Sometimes they're very active. The closest thing to a question at the moment is Boris, bring it, from Padre Eddie.
Wow.
So what have you got, Boris?
Thanks, Padre.
How about you tell us something about Paris that we definitely don't know?
I'll try to bring it even harder than I was already bringing it. I think the interesting thing about Paris is that, you know, most people who come here, you know, that are from the so-called New World, like the States or Australia or Canada, had this idea that Paris is a very old city. It's like an ancient city filled with layers and layers of culture. But most of the city that you can see is actually fairly new. Most of the city is from the second half of the 19th century.
Is that like the buildings that we're looking at now?
Mostly, yes. These are all Haussmannian or post-Haussmannian.
And you said that Haussmannian is your sort of specialty a little bit?
Yeah, that's a period I really, really like. So it's basically the second half of the 19th century when the world we currently live in was completely formed, you know, in terms of ideas of industry, like the Industrial Revolution, industrial mode of production. So it really determined, well, the lives we basically have today. And it really shaped the city of Paris as it is.
So when you said that you used to live in this area, did you live in a kind of building like that one there, Boris?
No, unfortunately, no. Yeah. That's my goal, right?
Yeah.
No, but this is the interesting thing about this area and about this park is that, as we said, it's right between the 17th and the 8th.
Right.
So 8th is obviously very posh, very chic. And the 17th is a bit more, you know, casual, popular, as they say here in France.
Batignolles.
Sorry?
The Batignolles area where the poets used to...
Yeah, exactly. See, you know that. Well, where I lived was Rue de Saussure. It was very close to Rue de Lévis. There's this beautiful pedestrian section, like an open market. You know, you have a lot of like foodie stores. It's,
Sure.
It's pretty cool, but it's nowhere near as, you know, elegant as and expensive as this part of the city.
I've got some questions have come through. They're quite
let's
easy.
go.
They're not so historical, but we'll start easy. We'll warm up to them. There's two. Is it a good park for a picnic?
It's a great park for picnic, though you have to wait for the picnic season because during the winter they have this like a repose time where you're not allowed to go on the grass.
To let it regrow back? Or?
Yeah, to let it regrow. So yeah, but it's a great park for picnic, and
You probably did that after a run every now and again. But you can. The second
occasion.
question is kind of related. How much of the park's used in winter months?
well, not a lot. I mean, mostly people come here to walk around, and to run. You know, so if you're a runner, there seems to be a runner right behind us.
I think they're watching.
Oh yeah. So a runner and an audience.
So this is the. Oh, that's beautiful. That.
Yeah. There's another gaudy gate.
So what do you mean when you say gaudy gate? Is that like?
I think it's just over the top. I mean, personally, although I like Haussmannian Paris and that entire period for its historical interest, I think the style of Second Empire is just like, you know, too glitzy, too ornate. If you had the chance to visit Napoleon's apartment in the Louvre, you have the idea of what I'm talking about. Napoleon III's apartment. It's just like too ornate.
Are you an expert on Napoleons?
I wouldn't say an expert, but I know.
Okay, I've got a question that, you know, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right?
Of course.
Okay,
yeah.
so I always get confused when I'm reading about Napoleon. Like, so I know there was one Napoleon who was sort of the main Napoleon.
Yeah, there's the main Napoleon.
And then it seems like there's a lot of other Napoleons who also did stuff.
Well, there are two
Can you
other...
dumb it down for me?
Yeah, so there are two other Napoleons. There's Napoleon II. He didn't really do anything, so he died when he was very young, so he left no mark on the history. But there's Napoleon III, who's a nephew of the actual Napoleon I. Now, there's an interesting comparison between the two because Napoleon I had this idea that he would conquer the world through military means, right? He wanted to reign supreme over everyone. Napoleon III saw that didn't really work for Napoleon I, so he had this idea to conquer the world through economy, through industry, through building infrastructure, building factories, developing industrial capitalism. So you could say that they were equally ambitious, although they had very different ideas of how they were doing it.
So basically, I can forget Napoleon II.
Yeah, you can forget about
it.
it.
And Napoleon III was kind of building stuff.
Yeah, he was building the city of
Was
Paris.
it him that did the Canal Saint-Martin?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was a Napoleon.
Yeah.
Is that the Arc de Triomphe there?
It is.
Okay, I didn't even notice that. We can walk. See, I told you this walk will take longer because we'll stop a lot.
Yeah, no worries, yeah.
But
Well, that's a thing that was started by Napoleon I, but was then only finished after he passed away. Now you could say that most of the Paris that you can see around is made during the time of Napoleon III.
right.
So yeah. But I think that those are all the Napoleons I'm aware of. I don't think there are other ones.
Okay, let's continue. And there's some questions have come through while I've been educating myself on Napoleon here. John is back on track with the parks. He's saying, was this open space when the park was built? Hang on, let me just read it. Or buildings torn down. So what was it before it was born, this park?
Well, you could say it was both things. First, it was an open space, but afterwards, park had several different iterations. When it was open, it was much larger. It was cut down to a certain extent during the Haussmannian intervention, and so you could say that whatever we can see now is roughly the half of the park that was originally here. So yeah, some buildings were torn down, but some buildings were built around the park, like these. Very expensive.
Well, there's a comment come through about these buildings. It says the building right behind where I was standing has an amazing apartment that you can rent on homeaway.com.
So
okay,
someone
Catherine.
slipped in a commercial there.
Well, Catherine, I don't think Catherine works for homeaway.com, but hey. And Debbie has a question we can't really answer. She says, how did I miss the first 9 minutes?
Sorry, Debbie.
Debbie, you can go back and watch it on replay. That's the beauty of these things. So there's another thing off the tour for a sec. The police in Paris.
Oh yeah, especially active these last couple of weeks. Yeah,
that's
given
true.
all the protests.
But they happen to travel in many different means.
Yeah.
I've had them on horses before on this show. I've had them on bicycles. I'm looking for the Segway.
Did you see the ones on rollerblades?
Yeah, I've seen them.
They command the least respect.
Yeah, that's true. So which way should we go now out of these two parks?
Let's go this way.
Okay, but this is I'll still show this because it is a stunning. What is that tree? Eucalyptus, maybe?
That would be your field of expertise.
I'm gonna say it's a eucalyptus.
Well, possibly, because the whole idea was, bring exotic plants from all over the world.
Right.
Bring a lot of exotic flowers. Now, okay, so you can see this is an interesting thing if you can focus at this gate here.
Okay, we can go towards it. Which one?
Yeah, so this one. Well, essentially what you have here is a park. All of the parks in Paris are considered public parks, so all of these spaces were nationalized after the French Revolution. And as any other public park in Paris, it's closed down after dark. The hours of opening vary, but this park is specific that it has private access to it. After the park closes down, some of the members, the owners of these buildings, can actually access the park and use it as their private garden.
Wow.
So yeah, you have like a couple of these private little accesses. So this park becomes a massive private garden for these.
Do you think? Have you seen that? Like, do they come out and have alcohol-fueled party raves?
That's what I would do. I mean, that's definitely what I would do.
And the police can't come and do anything about it?
Not really.
So in other words, if you and I were to jump the fence and come and have a beer in here one night...
Yeah, I think we would get busted
But
for
if the police busted us, we'd just say, oh, we live here.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I think we would have to prove it somehow, but
yeah, you're probably right.
There's an idea there, Ollie, so we'll hang on to
No,
that.
I tell you the easy idea is to befriend those people up there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
That's what we have to do. Well, there you go. There's something I had no idea about. I'd never even seen that.
So yeah, if you want to like a very snazzy party, you befriend one of these guys, then you wait after dark when the park closes down, and this becomes your playground, right?
Oh man! But they're all kind of diplomats and ambassadors around here.
Yeah, in most cases, yeah.
Yeah. Well.
It is one of the like swankiest parts of Paris. I mean, you could say the 8th is really like seen. I'm gonna talk like a Parisian snob now, but it's seen as a thing that belongs to the nouveau riche. Right, if you're really like old money, you would live in the 16th,
right,
or possibly in the 7th too. I mean, certain parts of the 7th. But if you're like flashy new money, like if you're an actor or podcaster, yeah. Exactly, a scholar in the field of comparative literature,
then where would we be living?
I think exactly where we are living right now.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question that's come in, a nice specific question. Thank you, Catherine. She says, "Can Boris tell us about some of the interesting house museums around the park?"
Oh yeah, well there is an Asian art house museum that actually has the second largest Asian art collection in France, and that is very close to Parc Monceau. Let me think about other things.
Have you been to this the museum that's called like the Nissim
de Komodo?
Yeah, have you been to that?
I haven't been to it. I've heard of it though.
Me too. I'm interested in that.
Yeah. So yeah.
So we've kind of done halfway through the park now.
Yeah.
Right?
This is yeah. This is roughly halfway through.
And
we
we-
should be fairly close to the fake Egyptian pyramid.
Okay.
I'm just thinking like it might be actually in the interior side.
That's okay. I think there's 12 people watching, which means they're enjoying what we're doing.
Wow. 12
So
people, I'm flattered.
you can ask them a question too, you know?
Really?
Yeah, ask them. Tell
Wow.
us where you're listening from. I assume most people are in America because it's morning in America and it's sleepy time in Australia, or in
Okay.
France.
Well, you know your audience better.
I guess
So
I
what
do.
would you guys be interested about most in Paris? What is your, like when you're thinking about the city of Paris, this is something I like asking my clients too, like what kind of image do you have? What kind of a city is it for you?
And then are you going to tell them that they're
And then
wrong?
I'm just gonna completely break all of their illusions and be like, that's so not the case.
So I think if I could speak while they're thinking about your question, I'd say most of the people watching love Paris,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even live here, and they watch these videos to get ideas for their next trips. Maybe they even
Alright.
book a tour with you in Paris in
well,
person.
why not? Yeah. Well, I would definitely say that when you come here, you want to visit parks, as this was your idea. Of course, you're going to go to see museums, and I mean, of course, I do tours of museums, but I'm thinking, you know, museums tend to look alike. What really distinguishes the city is like the city life, you know, street life.
And that's,
How you-
that's what you specialize in, like
yeah,
urban.
exactly.
Yep.
So it's like you want to see how people behave. You want to like sit in a cafe and watch the people roll around. You know,
Roll around. Which
Exactly.
cafes are you going to, Boris?
You don't want to know. We'll talk about it offline.
There are people watching in California, Maryland, and California again. So there's an idea.
Oh, nice.
We got Americans,
Wow.
which is what I
Right.
predicted, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're moving towards the colonnade slowly.
Does that mean we're going to miss this? Maybe we can do a little jump in and back out
Oh
again.
yeah,
to see.
that's the grotto. Yeah, that's actually one of the original parts of the park. But yeah, we could go either this way or this way.
You tell me. You're the expert. I will follow you.
Okay, well then let's continue this
Okay.
way. Like make a full circle.
Yep. And Jan is watching from sunny Florida,
Wow.
but no one wrote and Philadelphia is where John's watching. But no one told us what their thoughts are on Paris. Maybe they're so captivated by your voice and your tour.
Yeah, my beautiful nasal voice. Yeah.
So tell me why you what do you enjoy about touring and sharing your knowledge? What's the...
Honestly, the best thing for me is, and I think I'm really, privileged and blessed by doing this, is that I get to be asked a lot of interesting questions and I get a lot of interesting perspectives. And I really get to learn a lot myself, because people come from very different angles. As I'm doing a tour, I think like half of it is, me learning about things as I'm answering questions. So it's really a conversation, and that's the most interesting part.
And you've just stopped us here for some reason.
Yeah, I stopped us here at these broken pillars that are one of the Masonic symbols that we can see spread around Paris. This idea of
It's a very realistic pigeon on the top.
yeah, it's amazing, and it moves, right?
So what is it,
the
Masonic?
artistry-
Tell
the
me more.
artistry of that pigeon. Well, you can say that one of the interesting Masonic symbols are the ones that pertain to how ancient their order is supposed to be, right? So that's why we have the broken pillar. That's why we have Masons who pertain to pyramids. So you could say that either you will be looking at the Masonic order as something that sprung up in the 18th century, or you will see them as a continuation of the Templar Knights Order that was disbanded in the 14th century. Or if you go and read, their own literature, they would be saying how they actually go all the way back, either through Druids and Druidic traditions of Europe, or even further back to builders of the Tower of Babylon, to builders of pyramids, first architects that ever existed, right? So the idea of a broken pillar is this idea of ancient knowledge that still is maintained, that is still practiced,
And so they built it specifically broken. This isn't like a remnant.
This is, yeah, exactly, and this is something that I find really interesting about this park, is that both these pillars and that colonnade is made to look damaged, right? So it's fake damaged. And this is something that you can say it's quite kitsch, it's kind of over the top, it's very faux, but is really quite curious and interesting about the city of Paris, because you have all these things that were made to look older than they actually are.
Yeah.
And it speaks about this very European idea that the older something is, the better it is, right? So it's like this European competition of who's oldest, who can trace their roots back further, European aristocracy would basically compete who has the most ancient origin, right? And then people would sometimes fake it, right? They would build these things to look old, even though they are not necessarily old.
How intriguing.
Yeah, so you can have, you know, like a difference between something that was built to look broken intentionally. I mean, Rodin would play around with this idea when he would make statues that lack limbs, you know, that don't have a head or they don't have arms, because it would be like more valuable if it's damaged. Yeah.
Sometimes I put out bad podcast episodes on purpose with really bad editing.
There you go.
And people think,
oh my God, this comes from the 19th century.
Yeah.
Look at the quality of the video. It was made in the 80s.
In case you were wondering, Boris, if this walk with me was worth your time, I see John has said, I will look up Boris for a tour next time we're there. So
well,
there you go. So that's parisinperson.com for the rest of you that are wondering. And then Jan says, he's very informative. I suppose she's speaking about you.
Oh yeah, well.
And well-spoken, painting a lovely picture, even though it's not... Hang on, I've got to read this out. I'll turn around. Even though it's not in the parks... The comment's too long for me to read, so we're going to have to imagine the end of that.
I think I see the gist of it. It doesn't really concern the park per se, but...
Do you mean because we keep asking you questions that have nothing to do with the park?
Yeah, we talk about Paris all the time.
Should we get back onto the park then?
Okay, yeah, so let's take a look at that pyramid over there. So again, another Masonic symbol that we already touched upon, and a part of the original folly, you know. You can kind of see, you know, how the colonial world of the late 18th century was amazed by all these exotic things, you know, that you could see in other places of the world, where it was really hard to travel back in the day. Nowadays, you know, it's so easy to travel, you can go to any corner of the world, basically, you know, on a whim. But back in the day, it would take, you know, weeks or even months to reach certain parts of the world. So if you actually went there, you brought something exotic, it would be admired by everyone. So and of course, it would be a status symbol too.
And is that the idea of building?
Yeah, building these follies that would be like a heap of things that came from all over the world. Now this is another way that you can actually address the name of the park, Monceau, right? So you can either say that it comes from mousseau, that's a type of bread made of different grain, or you can say Monceau, that in French it means like a heap of things, like things in test, one over another.
So, okay. Oh, that's cool.
And it brings us again to this like 18th century like colonial idea that you should bring all of the things from the world to France, to Paris.
Which is what they did for the expositions and...
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Like the Universal Exposition and things alike. Now there is a pretty cool painting in the Louvre. When you go to the Italian gallery, you can see these two paintings that are like imaginary ideas of how the Louvre should look like, and it's all of the arts of the classical world, basically all of the valuable sculptures, you know, brought at one place. It's like this massive gallery that would have everything you ever saw.
Wow.
You know, and so that was their idea, like bring everything here, like bring the entire world here.
I've got a question for you as well. But no, continue what you were saying. But
well, I was just wrapping it up. I was saying that this was partially the idea behind the park. So we have, you know, the Greek art and colonnade, the Greco-Roman.
We have to go and look at the pyramid, Boris. We'll do a detour from the... But I've got comments coming in. There's too much going on, Boris.
Wow.
The comment that didn't finish before has been completed.
Okay.
Even though it's not the park's best season.
Oh, that was the thing. Oh, okay.
That's also, I'm not sure that's true. Because the autumn leaves are so beautiful right now.
Yeah, I guess it's a subjective thing, right? You could say that park is definitely more lush in the spring.
Which season's your favorite?
Oh, I would say very early spring, when leaves are only starting to bud, you know, but when there's not too much visitors around.
We could do another walk in spring in the opposite direction.
Yeah, why not?
How you feel about that?
Yeah.
We'll see how these commenters are going. Let us know if you want to hear more from Boris. You've got much more of Paris at your fingertips, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
We could do beyond the park.
I do other parks too, not just Monceau.
Okay.
That closely focused.
Go on parisinperson.com to check this out, but there's a few more comments. Let me read this one. Eric, I'm on a conference call in Atlanta, but it looks like you're having a better time than me. Thanks, he says. Well, you're welcome.
Well, let's hope it improves, Eric.
Yeah.
Keeping our fingers crossed.
Hang up on the conference call and enjoy this. Debbie adds, Paris is obligatory when visiting France to see the monuments, museums, parks, etc. But for me personally, and I can't read anymore.
Okay, wow.
So let's imagine.
That's kind of the most important part, really.
I'm going to imagine what she said. For me personally, Parc Monceau is my favorite part of France.
Oh, yeah.
What a great comment.
Wow.
Melanie says, would love to hear more from Boris. So that's great. That means if just one person says it, you've got a return invite.
Thanks, Melanie.
And remember, Mel, you can book a tour with him as well. So here's the pyramid. Not bad, not bad.
Yeah, not quite as impressive as those in Egypt, but you know, we'll not split hairs.
No, but this is a lot greener than those ones in Egypt.
Yeah, that's also true.
Okay, let's go back to where we were going.
Yeah. So there's a commemorative flag there that I would shortly like to address.
Sure.
So we can go back to our circle,
Yep.
and it's basically set up there to commemorate the first air balloon that was lifted from this park. So it's
Is that that one up there that I'm pointing
yeah.
to? Okay, so I've got a question for you as we're walking, and it's got nothing to do with the park. I mean, we don't have to only talk about Parc Monceau.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm the director today, but I wanted to ask you about, have you been to the, I forget what it's called, but it used to be the Human Zoo out in the Bois de
I've
Vincennes.
heard of it, outside of Paris,
Yeah,
right?
just-
I haven't, no, but I read a lot about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another part of like colonial heritage of France,
Yeah.
is that back in the day people were not okay, so like this is super racist, but it's history, so you know, people were not necessarily certain whether they should classify like people of other race as animals or as people. So
Right.
when they would approach orangutans, for example, they were not sure if they should just see them as like animals
Yeah.
or as people of different race.
So this is what, like 100 years ago? More?
150,
Yeah.
200, yeah. But you could say that the last human zoo that I'm aware of in Europe was active in Belgium in the 50s and in the 60s.
Really?
So yeah, you can find this on Google easily. Like you have these, you know, like Belgian people feeding a little African girl, you know, that's like in a space of a zoo,
Wow.
and that's like 50s and 60s. So,
Goodness me. Goodness
yeah,
me.
yeah. So nowadays it's a bit of a, you know, abandoned part.
Well,
of the
I went
Parc
out
Monceau,
there and
yeah.
did a little video before I was good at, or
Yeah.
better at doing videos, and I just sort of was taking little snapshots and stuff. But
Yeah.
what was really interesting about it was that Paris keeps it clean and tidy, and they mow the lawns, but they don't want to promote it,
Yeah.
so they don't know what to do with it. They just it just kind of sits there.
Yeah.
It's a
That's
sort
the
of
thing, right? Is when you're looking at this period, let's say, for example, the turn of the century, you know, 19th to 20th, and they call it La Belle Époque, you know, the beautiful era. And you have this amazing architecture, you know, design, Art Nouveau, like furniture, paintings, you know, it's all beautiful. But then when you look behind it, like what actually happened, you know, with the colonialism and racism and the slave trade and all of it, and you're like, oh, that's
yeah, right.
one of
Jeez.
the worst eras of the world. Okay, there we go. So 22nd October of 1797, the Frenchman André Jacques Garnerin, if I'm reading this right, was actually able to realize a flight with the first parachute that was ever made in
Wow.
history.
But
Right?
what he landed here?
Yeah.
Oh,
This is
wow.
where he would make this beautiful
So
experiment.
it's a successful experiment then.
Yeah, there's another one that wasn't so successful from the Eiffel Tower.
There's video footage of it as well.
there's that.
Oh
yeah,
my
that,
goodness.
Tailor guy who made his own parachute.
That's right. That's right. And he left an indent on the ground at the
Oh
bottom.
really?
Yeah.
Oh god. Yeah.
So there's still, everyone who started watching is still watching, which means they're
they're doing
enjoying it.
something right, though,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I think so. Or they've left it on and gone to start cooking. But hey, I'm glad that people are finding history interesting. That's always a success.
let's be optimistic about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
you could say that another thing about the park is that it was really supposed to be dedicated to arts. So there's a lot of busts of musicians around, and a lot of these alleys that are named after. Okay, this one is named after the first parachute
Who we just met, Mr. Jacques.
person. I can't really say parachute trooper. He wasn't a member of the army. But
No,
like,
fair enough.
how do you say that? Parachute person.
Parachutist.
Parachutist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or familiarly, the shootist.
The shootist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'd get away
For
with.
the family.
Yeah.
So yeah, but some of these alleys were named after the famous painters of the 17th century. And so it was supposed to be like, again, this idea of bringing all of the culture together, bringing, you know, everything together at one spot. Okay, so there's a runner right there.
There's the one runner
The
in
one
winter.
runner, yeah.
And once again, really beautiful. So this would be the, let's see, the eastern entrance to the
Yeah.
park, which
And
means
this
we're
is,
3/4 of the way through the
And
walk.
this is the Museum Chernucci for a person who asked about the house museums.
That was Catherine, I remember. The
Yeah,
Museum
yeah.
Chernucci.
Chernucci, yeah, that's the one that's filled with Asian art. So beautiful collection of Asian art.
Right, okay, that's the one you were referring to.
Yeah, yeah. that's,
I'm almost certain there's a guy I've had on the show a few times, John Baxter, an
oh
author.
yeah, I know John Baxter.
Okay,
yeah.
so his wife is makes movies, and we went to the screening, the premiere of one in I think that very building there, and it was so grand to go in. I'm almost certain it was there. It was one of the, you know, one of those sometimes there's these around while we're talking. Sometimes there's nights in Paris, and you have to tell me if you agree, where you go and see a film premiere in a fancy place in 8th arrondissement or something like that, and you think, this is a real Paris moment I'm living in. You're sort of aware of what's going on beyond just...
I would agree. Well, you know, when you really dig more deeply into that scene of how many exhibitions and how many premieres, like theater premieres, movie premieres, it's overwhelming. Like you can basically only do that and still not be able to make all of them.
If only you could survive on the finger food that they offer, you could make you would never need to buy dinner again.
Yeah.
So
well,
as
challenge.
as interesting as they might find our faces, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, let's take some of the park. Let's not do that.
This is what people know. But they need to know who they're booking a tour with, Boris.
Yeah, yes. Well, it's not only me that I am not the only person doing tours. I actually have something like 8-9 guides that work as satellites.
Right. But if John D. Murray, who wants to book a tour with you, specifically wants you, can that work?
Well, yeah, that can happen too. If I'm available, I'll be glad to give a tour personally.
And Padre Eddie says, Boris is great. This is the one who said to bring it, Boris.
Wow,
remember?
am I bringing it, Padre?
He says,
let me know if I'm bringing it enough.
He says, Boris is great, knowledgeable, and laid back. Great guide. That's a good. You could put that on your as your tagline.
Knowledgeable and laid back.
That's what I had. I did a podcast episode last night with David Leibovitz, you know, the chef.
Oh, yeah.
So you guys, that's coming soon, and he answered all the questions for the Patreons and everything. It was great, and he just said. He said he didn't say I was knowledgeable, but he goes, "Oh, you're so laid back," and I was like, "It's good, 2 laid back guys in the park."
Oh, there you go. That's what parks are, to relax.
That's right.
Walk
We're doing
around,
it.
Just take it all in.
What's this though? They're built like walls around the.
No, I'm thinking I would have to know more about botany to be able to aware that.
Well, we're not here for the botany.
That.
We're here for the left-hand side anyway, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking that has to be something protective, like.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, this is way more interesting. Yeah, this colonnade. So yeah, this.
Where's the best place to stand to take it in?
I'm thinking like.
You lead me.
From here.
Yeah.
Let's try not to have this yellow. Thing.
Yeah. Okay. No, we gotta own it. We gotta show this ugly thing so that we can show what we're avoiding.
Complete image, right?
Sandra says bonjour. That's a good question. Do you speak good French, Boris?
Well, decent.
Decent.
I wrote all of my research in French, so
wow.
Should be able to respond.
So let's just acknowledge it. I'll give you 5 seconds to see the disgusting thing. It should be a different color, really, shouldn't it? But now so what here?
So yeah, this colonnade that was made again to be damaged, right? So that it would look older than it is. Now, again, for people who are, curious about France and who like to think that Paris is such an ancient city, Paris is actually, for most of it, a copy of the city of Rome. So you have all of these monuments, like the Triumphal Arch, like Place de la Concorde, like the Pantheon, who are actually a copy of Roman monuments. And so, while the people from the New World think that Paris is so filled with history, people of Paris themselves have a bit of a complex, I would say, regarding cities like Rome or Athens. And so you could say that French culture is really defined by this idea that they should somehow compete with these much older, more prominent cultures like the Roman / Italian and Greek. So yeah, they would build again these fake ruins, you might say. To make up for the lack of history. So again, you see something is very historical, but those people see themselves as lacking in history, having to make up for something.
And what is it that we're looking at now? These exactly.
A colonnade?
Yeah, but I mean, what did it?
Well, it's another thing. It's like a purely decorative thing, right? Is that it's something you put in a park as an ornament that doesn't really have a function, not that I'm aware of. But it can be like a ruin of a temple. Let's imagine that this used to be a temple, although it never actually was, It's
just decorative. I would say that this part, history aside for a second, I'd say this exact place where we're standing is probably the place that people are most likely to take a picture of and put up on their Facebook or their Instagram. This is kind of the postcard shot of Parc Monceau. And I don't know how well you guys know this park, you guys watching at home, but
if you can Photoshop this yellow tube out of it, then it's the
so if I held it like, there you go, that's kind of the postcard picture there. If I were to...
Yep, there you go, that's the...
Oh, there it we'll rest the... Oh, with a bird flying through.
Oh yeah.
That's the
beautiful
shot.
Autumn leaves, yellows.
So if you've just, because people are tuning in as we're speaking, if you are just tuning in, this is the postcard shot from Parc Monceau, and I'm nearing the end of my tour. with Boris in person, who I'd say so far has been a hit. You've been a hit.
Oh, thanks, Ollie.
So
I say so about you and your podcast too. I've been a listener for a while, so you know.
That's very kind.
Well, it's the truth, right?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
should we? What about the bridge? We have to include the bridge.
Oh yeah, let's check out the Venetian bridge or the faux Venetian bridge.
Venetian.
Phoenician.
Faux Venetian. So just to stress, guys, we're
Not to be confused with actual Phoenicians, but
That's Phoenician with an F.
Yeah.
So that there is where we're going to end this walk, and I'm going to stress it to you. If you guys have a question about Paris or history or architecture or the urban layout or houseman, now is your chance to get it answered by an expert. So rack your brains.
Now or never, guys.
You basically have 5 minutes left. But on with the tour, Boris.
Tension is mounting.
Yeah, right? Okay, so this is the faux Venetian. So as you said, it's built to replicate
Yeah, basically
Venice.
the bridges of Venice. Yeah. Canals. Well, this entire pond, you might say, was again built artificially. It was not here to begin with.
It's not Venice, is it, Boris?
Not really, no. But you know, Venice is no Paris too.
That's
so.
true. And then over on this side, someone's been here with their graffiti.
Now, how would you see this, Ollie? Would you see it like as a spontaneous expression and a part of the urban living, or would you see it as desecrating a beautiful fake Venetian bridge?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what I do see. That almost looks like the word Boris.
Oh, really?
Well, I can see R-I-S and an O.
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I can
So-
see the IRS too.
So maybe
knows?
you're the one that should be answering the questions about
Well,
this place.
yeah.
Shall we cut around and back down through the middle?
So you want to go past the carousel? That's
Yeah.
a bit of a French folklore there.
Padre's got a question.
Oh yeah, let's go, Padre.
He says, Padre, who was your fiercest critic at the beginning and has turned all the way around.
Wow, I managed to sway Padre to my favor.
He says he's tremendous. Talking, I think, referring to you, because we haven't mentioned anyone else. Houseman, he could be talking about.
Yeah, good.
But
It
he
was-
said, he did have a question. He said, thanks, Boris. What about murals in the area?
Oh, there's not a lot of murals in the area. If you want to do those, you have to go to the 20th district of Paris. I would say to Marais, so the third and the fourth.
Is this meaning like sort of street art murals? Is that what we're taking?
I'm
that to mean?
thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
In most cases, when you say murals, that's what you're referring
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
So
yeah.
not a lot of them in the 8th. 8th is like a very fancy area, so
No.
they wouldn't allow those. But I'm thinking, yeah, 18th, more or less, but mostly 20th. If you know, you have all these different companies who do tours of urban art and graffiti.
Well, in fact, I'm going to do one the 20th day of Christmas and the 20th arrondissement. I'll be doing street art.
Oh, there you go. So that's where you're going to go to see them.
And I forgot to point out the grotto that we
Oh
walked
yeah, the
past.
grotto, yeah. Another little like beautiful fakeness.
Now, here's a comment from Sandra. And now I don't know what it's referring to because I only just saw it, but it also could be you. She could be
Oh.
referring to you.
Let's have it.
Looks tacky to me.
Well,
What? What do you mean? Sandra. Sandra.
sacre bleu.
I think she's talking probably about the bridge. Yeah.
Or the graffiti.
Or the graffiti
grotto.
on the bridge. Or she could be you, Boris.
Yeah, it might be.
Not everyone can be a fan of the work that we do.
Yeah, yeah. Wouldn't be a first time I was called tacky, so you know.
Okay, so a lot of people have tuned in since we started and would have missed you. Maybe I'll try and paraphrase it and you tell me if I've learned anything. This was where you had to pay your taxes when you were coming into Paris.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, a customs toll booth.
Yeah, toll gate, yeah, you could say that.
I read somewhere, and maybe you know if this is true or not, that in the top
Mm-hmm.
lives like a watchman who looks over the
So
gardens.
yeah, that is like a urban legend that watchman is the 5th generation of
Yeah.
watchmen who are connected to the park.
And
It's not confirmed. Yeah, I could say that it could be true, but I can't, 100% stand behind it. But what is like you could say a historical fact is that initially when this toll booth was made, the Duke of Chartres had his personal apartment there, so that was made for him. So there are living quarters there. Then it was redesigned in later iterations. But yeah, it was meant to be a living quarter now. Whether there's like a mythical 5th generation watchman of the Parc Monceau or not.
but now
you
it's a
know.
toilet, isn't it? A public toilet.
Amongst other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to finish up over at the Art Nouveau metro
Oh, yeah,
entrance.
that's
but
what I
first,
wanted to.
I've got a story for you that I think you'll like. And Sandra was referring to the graffiti, not you
Oh.
or the bridge.
Oh.
But I have a story to you and to the listeners who were watching So full story, okay? But I'm interested on your thoughts on this.
Oh, yeah,
So
let's have it.
for the 6th arrondissement, you guys will remember that I was walking with Amber Minogue and we went down to Café Procop, and there's the courtyard.
Oh yeah, the Couronne. Yeah.
That's right? And there's a cafe there, or a restaurant called Un Dimanche à Paris. I felt
yeah,
something.
the chocolate place. Yeah.
Right? And there's the tour, the part of the Philippe Auguste wall is there. Have you seen that on the inside?
No, I haven't. No,
Okay, so you have to watch the video. So I went in there, and after, I'm telling you guys this too, I went in after I pressed pause, and I went and I said, hey, I love the Philippe Auguste wall. What can you tell me about it? He said, look, come back on Wednesday at 9 in the morning and I'll show you our basement.
Wow.
Wait, now that I say it out loud, it kind of sounds like he was going to kill me or something. But today's Wednesday, so I went back there early this morning and he took me down and showed me like this whole section of the wall.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
Yeah, so there's the part of the Philippe Auguste wall going right down in the basement and through like a set of tunnels that he said used to be like an escape route for royalty or something.
Wow.
I'll show you the pictures after we finish.
That's
But that's
sweet. I really want to learn more about it.
so I figured I'd just give you a story in return
Well,
for
thanks, Ollie. We exchange stories, like
all. Yeah, well, it's a barter system here, Boris. Hang
only
on.
equitable, right?
Yeah. So one little interesting fact about that restroom in the tower, it is where the murder happened. ...
No,
Can't read it
you
anymore.
can't have ... there. We
No,
have
but
to
it's
know.
because I don't know. There's no way on Facebook Live to read the full comment.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to assume what she's talking about.
Wow, what kind of murder? See the macabre shadow on this little tour there.
Maybe we should get out of here.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be noisy. So some parts you're gonna have to talk loudly, but you
Okay,
will
I'm just
finish up the
gonna
walk
speak
here.
up. Yeah. So this was my personal request that I would like to end the walk with this beautiful subway station that was designed by Hector Guimard, and is one of the key features of Art Nouveau in Paris. So, and is one of the places we visited on my Art Nouveau tour, the one I said that was my favorite tour that I'm doing. So you can see that this entire station, and Ollie, please tell me if I'm speaking loud enough, was made to introduce organic elements to industry, right? So we are talking about the very pinnacle of the Industrial Revolution, when people are moving away from the countryside, they're pouring in the cities so they could work in factories, and they're very frustrated with city living, right? They live in these small, cramped up spaces, they lack nature, they lack natural elements. So Art Nouveau comes as a reaction to that partially, that it introduces natural elements and blends them with industrial
This is where you'll have to. In fact,
materials.
stop talking while all the cars start again, and we'll walk around and you continue.
Okay, so people can see.
Yeah. Because when those motorbikes start, it's almost impossible for.
Yeah.
But now they're gone. So continue.
So basically, this entire station would play with people's fears of industry, and it would be nicknamed the mouths of the beast, right? The idea was that you have this massive worm going underneath the surface that opens its mouth and swallows all of the people. So when you're looking at this entrance, you can see that these white lights would be like the teeth of the worm. These red lights would be the eyes, and they're propped up like the eyes of a snail, right? And this would be the mouth, and then you would have these scales all over. And it's this beautiful mixture of floral and faunal elements, right? It's like a petal and the stem of a flower that you can see. So it's also like... And now you have a snail, but it's a stem of a flower too. And then you can see these scales are designed.
So there's the eye.
Yeah,
And the scales, you mean the tiles there?
No, not the tiles. Actually, on this side. Scales are on this side. So you can see that they're shaped as an owl, but also on the inside they have a peacock spreading his tail, and they have the letter M, right? That's Metropolitan. That's like the metro system of Paris. And another interesting thing about this tour is that Art Nouveau came in the time of a very repressed bourgeois way of life. Yeah, in England it was called Victorian, but you might say that it was very repressive towards sexuality. So Art Nouveau would be like this explosion of vegetative eroticism, and it would sneak in all these like erotic hints into its architecture. So you would have a lot of stylized penises and clitori.
Even
like this.
here?
Oh yeah, this is a great example right here, right? When you take a look at this section here,
Yeah.
you can see what it looks like.
I can imagine.
You can imagine.
Maybe I've got a question for you exactly on what you just said. The traffic stopped. Perfect. Someone told me that there's phallic symbols in the cast iron balconies sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And someone told me that it signified where prostitutes would work. True or false?
Well, there were a lot of hidden bordellos, and they were mostly situated in private apartments. Now, I'm not able to confirm that, although I know that in Art Nouveau buildings you have a lot of phallic symbolism introduced in wrought iron balconies. So yeah, I could not be. That might be an urban myth.
So there are phalluses,
Oh, there are phalli all over the place.
but
yeah.
maybe not for bordellos.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And did I cut you off from saying something then at the end? Maybe I'll take a look at the teeth. You said those lights at the front with the teeth?
Oh yeah.
I'll just walk down the metro so
So
you can feel.
people were very much afraid of trains back in the day. You know, if you can put yourself in the optics of a person who lived at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, you saw a train for the first time. It was terrifying, right? It spewed a lot of smoke. It was made out of steel and iron, so it would.
This couldn't have made them feel any better.
Exactly, and I was going to say, right, this is an underground train, so it's even more scary when you think about it. So they would build these stations in Art Nouveau style to play with that fear, to alleviate it as much as possible, if at all.
Wow.
But yeah, it's just like this beautiful blend of organic and industrial, of artificial and natural, of city living and countryside living. So one of my aspects of Paris.
One of your favorite aspects of Paris, right in front of one of the most elegant parks in Paris.
There you go.
I think we can wrap up on that note,
Well,
Boris.
all things favorite and nice, yeah.
This
Well,
is. You want to do the outro?
Oh no, I was just gonna thank you for having me, and yeah, you can do the outro.
I was going to say, so this is what I've said it a few times now, but if you're just tuning in, Boris from Paris in Person, look it up, parisinperson.com. He does tours, the kind of interesting stuff that you just heard, and I'm very grateful that you were the guest for the 8th hour of this one, because I feel like I learned a heck of a lot, and I hope that you guys did too. So, in summary, book a tour with Boris, tune in tomorrow morning for my 9th walk. I'm going to walk down Rue des Martyrs.
Oh, nice.
And then check the site, theeiffeltower.com, for all the rest of it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ollie, and bye to Ollie's audience.
And I'll let you into this group so you can watch the video and see the comments. So
Sweet.
if you guys have any more comments after we finish, if you're watching on the replay, Boris maybe will even respond to them.
Yeah, maybe I will. Bye.